CrimeDivers. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jill.
And welcome to today's episode.
Hello everybody, welcome back.
So before we start, we would just like to say thank you to our newest patron. And that is Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It's really appreciated. To get support from anybody is just fantastic. So thank you so much for that.
Yep, and we hope you enjoy catching up on our catalogue of Patreon episodes. Which
Yeah.
are quite a few there now, so
Yeah.
enjoy those. And what have you got for next week?
Well, this week it's actually, I think we've got a new one coming out on Friday.
Oh, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that is about a British backpacker who was unfortunately murdered in New Zealand.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's awful, heartbreaking, as they all are.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what we've got coming out on Friday. So
for anyone that hasn't joined Patreon or doesn't know about Patreon, Jill's going to give you a little explanation.
oh, am I now?
Yes, that's
I would just like to tell you all that she didn't tell me that she was going to say that. So just a quick overview. Patreon is a site where you can sign up to support your favourite podcast, and you can listen to extra content. So you'll get bonus episodes. You can get early access to episodes. Like our normal episodes come out on a Tuesday, but on Patreon they actually come out on a Sunday. You'll get ad-free episodes. And we've got a mysterious
sort of series.
Yeah. So you just totally fit me.
There's three tiers basically. So there's a tier that's just £1, and that's just literally for your support. Nothing.
Yeah, just general support. And early access. And ad-free.
And then on the £3 tier, that's where you get the
bonus episode
a month. But then on the £5 tier, that's where you get the mysterious episode as well as the bonus episode. So you get two episodes there.
So, and that'll be in your own currency. Obviously, it's for us. It's in pounds because we're in Scotland. But it'll come up on the app. It will show you in your own currency, so there'll be no confusion about prices and stuff. And it takes literally 2 minutes to sign up.
Yeah.
There's no minimum term contract or anything like that. You can leave whenever you want.
But that's on at patreon.com/CrimeDivers.
Yeah, that's it. So if anybody would like to join up, that would be fantastic.
And just before we get into this week's episode, Jill's got an apology to make as well.
Yeah, well,
I
actually did apologise to our Patreon supporters, and I'll apologise again. I'm so sorry. They will know what I'm talking about already. But yeah, I made a mistake. So last week's episode, which was Death Row for Lil Devil, that I actually published that by accident before it was supposed to come out.
Yes.
So it was on a Saturday, and I was like, I've just remembered that I had to schedule the episode for the Sunday for the Patreon episode, because that's when they come out. And I had a banging headache, so doing that should have been enough. But for some reason I thought it would be a good idea just to publish the rest of our episodes that we'd already recorded. So I did that and was very proud of myself that I'd managed to do that with a headache. And then I went away, had my dinner, blah, blah, blah. Came back a couple of hours later, looked at the podcast phone and realised I had a couple of emails. So I looked at the emails, and there was one from our website telling us that our latest episode had been imported. And I'm like, what do you mean our latest episode? We don't have a latest episode. That was a few days ago. And that's when I realised that I'd actually published it by accident.
Instead of just scheduling.
Instead of scheduling it for 2 weeks away or whatever it was, or a week away.
Because anybody that doesn't know, we obviously record quite a few in advance, so we always have a few ready to sort of go, and Jill will schedule them for each week that they're due out. But instead of doing that, she actually decided to publish one which wasn't due out for another couple of weeks. Yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't get away with that without a few listens going down. So.
We did have a few listens, quite a few listens actually, more than I would have liked. So I wanted to clear up any confusion for anybody who did listen to it, or maybe people that saw it and were going to listen to it and then it disappeared, because obviously we deleted it, and then we published, I've scheduled it for the right date, so it published last Tuesday. Because
obviously we have a particular order and we couldn't really go out of that order because then it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made sense because of the stuff that we're talking about. So I deleted it, and so that's why you maybe have seen it or listened to it, and then it's disappeared, and then it's appeared again.
Wondering why it's back in today.
So that's
this week, sorry.
Yeah, so that's that. I just want to clear that up just in case anybody was confused about it. and to apologise to our Patreon members because they get the early access, so they should have listened to that first.
Yeah.
But obviously they didn't because other people got to listen to it.
It's the first time you've ever done it. And what's your lesson learned?
Do not do podcast stuff when you have a headache.
Absolutely. There we go. Good lesson learned for today.
Okay.
So shall we
crack on?
Yes, I'm sure they've heard us droning on enough. Let's get a crack on with today's episode. So, where in the world are we, Jill?
We're in Australia.
Okay, and what's the title?
The Bega schoolgirl murders.
Okie dokie.
It's not actually...
Well, what is it?
I'm just going to leave that in because it's actually called... Hang on. A Night of Terror.
Right. You got a headache?
No, I haven't got a headache.
Seriously.
Maybe my lesson should be just to geek up podcast time.
Maybe it should be. Right. So tell the listeners, what is the actual title?
A Night of Terror.
Okay. Right.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Shall we just dive in?
Yeah, let's just get on with it, okay? So, as I said, we are in Australia, in a place called Bega, which is a town in the southeast of New South Wales. It sounds like a beautiful place, as the name Bega comes from the local Aboriginal word meaning big camping ground.
Oh, right.
So it's obviously like a lot of camping grounds.
As it says.
It lies at the foot of Mumbulla Mountain and is surrounded by Biamanga National Park. If I said any of those words wrong, Australian listeners, I'm sorry. So it used to be known as a safe place for children to grow up, but that wasn't the case one weekend in 1997. So it was the New South Wales Labour Day long weekend in the October school holidays, and a group of Bega High School students were having a weekend camp out at a place called White Rock, which was near their homes in the village of Callaroo. So it wasn't far away, it was close by.
Yeah.
So 2 girls on the camp out who we're going to talk about today were Nichole Collins, born on the 14th of November 1980, so she was now 16, and Lauren Barry, born on the 11th of October 1982, so she was 14, just about to turn 15.
Okay.
So the girls had been really close friends for years and were part of a friendship group with Rebecca Campbell and Sarah Darcy. Nichole, Sarah and Rebecca all had horses, so the girls spent most of their weekends riding together. So Nichole was described as being really outgoing and friendly, and she always had lots of energy, was full of life. She was always on the go and always had something to do. She worked part-time in a supermarket and she wanted to become an interior designer or a chiropractor. So Lauren was described as being much more low-key than Nichole. She was very like a homebody. She loved being at home with her parents and her brother. She was sweet and calm, kind and generous, and a lot of fun to be around. She wanted to work with small children or animals.
Oh, right.
So Lauren's brother Nathan described her as his best mate. Like, they fought like cat and dog, but they would soon make up and they had a deep, unconditional love for each other. So the reason for the camp out was that it was for Lauren's birthday, because it was the weekend before she turned 15.
Right.
So all the teenagers on the camp out, they were trustworthy, they were responsible, their parents still made sure it was supervised. Like Lauren and Nichole's parents went down every so often to check on them. It was an area that they went to often, and it was peaceful and overlooking the ocean.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, they weren't far from home, and they promised that they would pop back for food and showers every day. So that's how close they were, that they could actually walk back and get a shower and get some food and stuff.
Away,
yeah. So on the Saturday, Nichole went home for a while as it was her mum's birthday, and Lauren went home for a family dinner, and then they went back to the campsite later. So on the Sunday night, as it was a long weekend and they didn't have school the following day, the group stayed up late. So they were just sitting, chatting around the campfire, listening to music, just chilling. Yeah. So Nichole, she had been a bit upset because she had just split up with her boyfriend. Right. But he was supposed to be coming to the camp out, so she was wondering where he was, because I think she wanted to talk to him. So the others kept saying, like, don't worry, he's probably on his way. But Nichole decided that she was going to walk to Gilla and talk to her ex, because one of them had said they knew where he was beforehand, so right. In this place called Gilla. So she wanted to go and talk to him to see if they could, like, work things out. So Lauren said that she would go with her to keep her company, and she knew that the ex was at another friend's house for a party, so they headed off. So eventually they reached the main road and headed towards Gilla, which I think was just a few miles away, but not too far that You know, it was within walking distance.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They were young, obviously. They were like 14 and 16, and they were used to just walking everywhere.
Around, yeah.
You know, they didn't have cars and whatnot. They just walked everywhere. So, this area was described as a very carefree place. There was a high level of trust. There were no great risks. It was just a remote area where nothing much really happens. So the following morning, Lauren's brother Nathan was the first camper to wake up and saw that Lauren and Nichole weren't there. So he hadn't actually been there when the girls headed off. He'd been somewhere else and came back later. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure when he came back if he thought they'd already gone to bed or if he was thinking, oh...
maybe they've gone home or...
I don't think he really... Or maybe he thought they were coming home later. I'm not really sure what he thought.
I guess if people are coming and going all the time, you wouldn't really think too much about it.
Exactly, yeah. But when he woke up and saw they weren't there in the morning, he was kind of like, shit, like, I better go and find them. Mm-hmm. So he headed straight home and asked his parents if they had seen them. And his parents were like, no, they were supposed to be with you. Mm-hmm. So Lauren's mum, Cheryl, started ringing around Lauren's friends and looking for her. And Lauren's dad, Garrett, he went to the campsite to sort of speak to the other kids and see what he could find out. So he asked the other campers where Lauren was, and he was told that her and Nichole had walked to Gilla the night before. And one of them suggested that they were like, oh, they're probably at Nicole's house. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, they weren't. And no one knew where they were. So Nicole's dad, Graham, he got in the car and he drove out past the campsite towards the ocean and sort of searched along the cliff tops. The others searched like all the trails because there were a lot of trails round about, but they just weren't anywhere to be seen. By lunchtime that day, the families decided it was time to call the police, and they launched a proper search. So soon after, a local resident found some abandoned clothes on a dirt road not far from the campsite. So there was a girl's top and a checked shirt, and they were identified as Lauren's. Right. So the clothes were given to her mum, and she put them away. Yeah, she folded them up, put them away in a drawer, and I was like, but why? Like, surely they should have been kept. I mean, I know they didn't know. I mean, it could have came to nothing. The girls could have just wandered off, stayed at somebody else's house. But for now, you would have thought they would have kept a hold of them just in case they needed to be looked at for forensics.
Exactly.
One of the officers said that they just didn't put two and two together, because the girls were just missing at that stage. Right. It was the first day. So as I said, they were like, they could have just been at a friend's house, you know. But as I said, you'd still think...
Especially when you find their clothes. I mean, I'm not saying that instantly means something's
happened.
Of course not. But it is random when you find somebody's clothes, isn't it? And they don't know where the girls are, so obviously that's, it's not good.
Yeah, I know. So, I was surprised. So, after a while, a council worker found a large pink TV on the road near the campsite. He loaded it onto his truck and he took it to the local refuse centre. And a few hours later, someone took it home and repainted it black, and they sold it to a local hotel. And it wasn't until a few weeks later that it was realised that the TV was a vital clue, but we'll get back to that. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, detectives established quickly that the girls weren't runaways. Mm-hmm. Detective Sergeant Mark Winterflood talked to the parents, and after finding out a bit about the girls, he just knew that something had happened to them. They hadn't just run off. Mm-hmm. So the whole community came together to search for the girls, and they were joined by mounted police and the dog squad. By the Wednesday, Detective Shane Box received more evidence that the girls hadn't run away because they hadn't touched their bank accounts, they hadn't taken any items from home. So the media was publishing the story, the headlines being "Fears held for girls," and the families made an emotional plea for help. They held a press conference and the two mums were sobbing with their husbands trying to comfort them, and it was so sad to watch. It was awful.
I couldn't imagine that would be.
Especially because at that point I knew what, I didn't know the full story because I hadn't sort of got to that at that point, but obviously I knew this is a true crime thing, so obviously I know what's... Yeah, exactly, but at this point they were just like, our girls are missing. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what actually happened to them, so... Yeah. Well... So Garrett, Lauren's dad, said, quote, "The pain I'm going through and not knowing where she is unbelievable." Nicole's mum, Delma, said, quote, "She was having fun and she just said, 'see you tomorrow.' And then you actually can't understand what she's saying because she just started sobbing again, and your heart just breaks for them." Mm-hmm. So the the publicity generated a rush of information. A local mum came forward and said that she was driving towards Tathra at 9:50 p.m. Mm-hmm. and that Sunday night where she saw a car stopped on the highway. She wasn't able to pass safely, so she had to stop and kind of say, like, motion to them, do you want to move?
Like, move it away.
And in the light of her headlights, she saw 2 girls and a man standing by the car, and she gave the police like a clear description of the man.
Yeah.
So the car finally moved over, and the girl was able to overtake safely, and she continued on her way. Because obviously she didn't know him.
No, of course not.
Yeah. So, sorry. Another witness came forward to say that he had seen a pink TV abandoned on the roadside, and other people came forward like little bits and pieces of information. So everyone in the community were talking about the disappearance. Like, it's just all they could talk about. Everyone knew that, well, they either knew the girls or they knew their parents or they knew their siblings. They
knew somebody.
Yeah. This was one of these small places where everyone knows everyone, and they were all worried about what had happened to them. Like, the police officers would turn up at the parents' houses, and there would be like members of the community just leaving, like after dropping food off to them, or just staying to offer support. Like, everybody just wanted the girls back.
Of course.
So after they had searched all the areas they could, police actually had to scale back the search. So most of the team returned to their stations, and that left 4 detectives still on the girls' case. This was about a month after they'd disappeared. But just as the investigation was scaled back, new information suddenly surfaced about a pair of violent career criminals, Leslie Camilleri and Lindsay Beckett. So, and they were 2 guys, by the way, just like Leslie and Lindsay.
Yeah, I was thinking of, like, they sound more like women's names, but I mean, it could be easily be.
Yeah, I mean, Leslie's a girl or boy's name, so is Lindsay.
Yeah, to be fair, I knew a boy Lindsay when I was growing up. I used to go to school with a boy Lindsay.
I used to have a boyfriend at school called Lindsay.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, obviously not the same person.
Not the same person, no.
But yeah, so yeah, just to clear that up, they're both men.
Yeah.
So Leslie was described as a dangerous psychopath who, since the age of 12, had racked up 146 criminal convictions.
Holy shit.
He was now 28. He had been considered uncontrollable as a child and spent a lot of his childhood in juvenile detention.
And he's actually out roaming free at the minute.
Yeah. Which he actually shouldn't be, because I think he was on... I actually think he was in the process of being investigated for something else.
Oh, right, okay.
Which, you know my memory. I wrote this over a week ago.
Yeah, I know. But you think you wrote over a year ago.
I'm sure we'll get to it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll.
So he had known Lindsay for 2 or 3 years. Lindsay was from New Zealand, and at age 23, he had already had multiple convictions for robbery and assault. He now lived in Australia and was described as having a really low IQ, and he had fallen under the influence of an older individual of a much stronger personality, meaning Leslie.
Yeah.
So an informant who lived in a place called Yass. What a cool place. Yass.
Where are you from? Yass. I'm from Yass.
I don't know about in other places in the world, but in Scotland we say Yass as in...
Like, nice one.
Yeah, yes. Like, yes, nice one. It's like, yes.
Yes.
So that's why we're speaking like that.
Yeah, I know. I don't, clearly didn't realise, forgetting that people might not realise what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're
Scottish
Scottish.
slang.
Well, it might be in other places, I don't know, but... So an informant who lived in a place called Yass, as well as the 2 men, that's where they lived, told local police that he had heard them saying, I bet the police try and blame this on us, after they'd seen an article in the paper about the girls' disappearance. And the informant was like, why would you say that? Like, why would they try and pin it on you? Like, what have you done?
I know,
like,
yeah. Hide there, like.
And he, like, and he thought they were just kind of acting a bit odd about it, and he knew what kind of people they were, and that they'd been nearby at the time the girls went missing. Because I'm not sure, I mean, I'm assuming he must have been like a friend, but I'm not sure how close of a friend he was, but to know like that stuff then, to know where they were and stuff like that, he must have been a friend.
Yeah.
So police checked the background of the 2 men and found that Leslie had recently been in court on 6 counts of the violent rape of an 11-year-old girl, but he was freed after his trial was aborted on a legal technicality. I think that's maybe what I was talking about. You know, if it hadn't been for this legal technicality...
He might not have been roaming the streets.
Then, he might not have been roaming the streets. So, and I'll just get on the next one. It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, of course it is.
So Leslie and Lindsay were also on bail, awaiting trial for the abduction and multiple rape of a 19-year-old woman.
Right.
So that's, if they maybe hadn't have been like out on bail or...
They obviously shouldn't have been bad sense of
well, yeah, because if they're raping an 11-year-old and a 19-year-old, then no, they shouldn't be out roaming the place.
They should be on remand until the
trial, whatever. So the detectives then got a call from Canberra police with the news that they had arrested Lindsay after chasing a stolen car. In that car, there was some blood-stained clothing found in the boot. So the Bega police decided to go and introduce themselves and have a look at the clothing and see if there was any evidence of him being involved in the girl's disappearance. Mm-hmm. So Detective Winterflood and Detective Gray drove to Canberra, and on the way, Detective Gray was preparing for interviewing Lindsay. So he was reading through various witness statements, and that's where he again read the report of the abandoned pink TV where the girls disappeared, and he had like a light bulb moment, and he said to the other detective that it would make sense that if someone had a TV in their car, that they would just sort of put it out on the side of the road to make room for two girls to get in the car. Yeah. You know, if it was like on the back seat or whatever. But the other detective, he was like, nah, I think you're kind of reaching a bit here. Like, I don't know why. But he was like, and he said something to the effect of like, that's really a bit of nothing, and he didn't really give it a second thought. So anyway, they got to Canberra and they interviewed Lindsay, and they said he was just being really arrogant and not really bothered his arse about being there. This is the one that's got the lower IQ, remember? So I'm not sure if maybe he didn't fully understand, because he'd been picked up for having a stolen car. Maybe he didn't sort of understand what was going on.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he really just didn't give a shit.
Possibly.
So they were just about to finish the interview, and Detective Winterflood asked him if he'd had a pink TV in his car, and Lindsay just kind of sat up straight, you know, kind of like had a reaction, and the detective was like, "I've just hit a nerve here."
Yeah.
So he didn't say much about it, but the detectives noted that there was something about that TV that was important. So shortly after, Lindsay did admit to having a TV in his car in Bega, but he couldn't remember what had happened to it.
Right.
But random that he can't remember what happened to a TV.
Yeah.
So that's when the detective decided to start looking at the theory that the TV was put out onto the roadside to put people in a car.
Yeah.
And they thanked Lindsay for his time, and then they left. So from there, they went to Yass to try and meet the informant. And Yass, the detectives, discovered that Lindsay and Leslie had actually stolen a pink TV from the informant.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's probably why the informant was an informant, because they were like, nah, fuck him. Fuck them, they stole my pink TV.
Yeah. Kind of laughing that it's even a pink TV though. Like,
I know. Well,
a bit random, isn't it?
Actually, did we used to have a pink TV? I think there was a while back when my kids were young that pink TVs were a thing. But for little girls, not for two grown-ass men.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what
But then again, the informant, it could have been their kids' TV or something, but you just don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was a pink TV.
Yeah.
So that put them like very close to where the girls had gone missing. So Lindsay was still in custody in Canberra, and Leslie had recently been arrested for some other unrelated matters and was in custody in another place called Galburn. So that was handy. They were actually both in police custody already. Just goes to show what they're like. They're like unrelated crimes and they're arrested.
Totally.
So Leslie was interviewed in Galburn jail, but as soon as the subject of the pink TV was raised, he refused to answer any more questions.
Right.
So he went back to his prison cell, and it was later reported that when he got back to his cell, he was like crying and like banging his head against the wall. So I think he probably realised, shit. So the detectives then interviewed Lindsay again, and they told him that they could link him to the girl's disappearance, and they put like A4 size photos of the girls in front of him, so it was like right
in your face.
Right, yeah, and it was like face pictures of the girls, so you know what I mean, like them close up. And he turned them over. He couldn't look at them, so he turned the pictures over. He then asked to take a break for a cigarette. So while he went outside, and while he was smoking outside, he burst into tears and told the guards, "They've got us." So he was marched right back into the interview room. Don't know if he got to finish his cigarette, but I would have been like, "No, put it out. Let's go.
Let's go. We've got a crime to solve here."
Yeah. So he was marched back into the interview room, and he asked the detectives for a map so he could show where the girls were. So they got a map and he showed them where they were, and then he went on to give a detailed confession about what happened that night. So I'm going to tell you this whole thing is his version of events, and just a trigger warning that there's rape, murder, drugs involved.
Okay.
I don't think drugs should be a trigger warning, but maybe.
Who knows?
But I'm just preparing you for what's going to happen.
Okay.
So he told detectives that... sorry. He told detectives that he and Leslie injected each other with drugs as they drove from Bega to Tathra. He said, quote, Les was driving the car and we were going to the beach because I hadn't been to the beach for ages. Mm-hmm. And we were going to go there for a drink and just see if there was any parties. And we were going up the hill and we seen these two girls and Les stopped. Les asked them if they wanted a lift and they said, yeah, all right. And then we said we were going to the beach and asked them if we wanted to come and they said, yeah. But the girls' family and friends are adamant that they would never have willingly got into a car with two strangers and that they must have been forced into the car. Mm-hmm. The opinions of the detectives is a bit mixed. Some think that because there was no signs of a struggle and the witness saw them chatting to one of the men outside the car, that they did get in willingly. Mm-hmm. And because Lindsay was telling the truth about other details, they were like, well, what would you get out of lying about this?
Yeah, like, I don't think it really affects things too much if... Does it?
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
But some officers don't think that they did get in willingly, so it's a bit of a mixed. Lauren's brother said there's no way she had gotten in that car. It was like a banged up car, and the men were off their faces on drugs. And the girls have always said they would never get in a car with a stranger, but you don't know. I mean, you don't know.
You don't know.
In his confession, Lindsay claimed that they drove with the girls for 5 kilometres to the Tathra Beach Surf Club, where him and Leslie drank a few beers and the girls just chatted together. He said as the town was quiet, they then decided to drive back to Bega, and the girls asked if they could stop at the campsite so that they could let their friends know what they were doing. Mm-hmm. So they were travelling on a dirt road towards the campsite, and as the car wasn't suitable for that type of road, like it was more suited to like a 4-wheel drive rather than whatever it was that they were driving. The car began like sort of scraping on the surface of the track and caused some damage. Right. And that caused Leslie to become aggressive and started shouting at the girls. So he pulled over and he produced a knife. And as Lindsay said, he freaked out, shouting like, what the fuck are you doing? And like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it must have been their fault that he was driving down a dirt road. I don't know.
Well, I don't know how it's their fault, but alright.
He then told the girls that they weren't allowed to get out the car, and he told Lindsay that if they tried to get out, to stab them. But Leslie, the girls were obviously terrified and crying and begging to be let go. But Leslie turned the car around and he headed back to the main road while shouting at the girls to shut up and to stop their snivelling. So they got onto the highway and drove to Callaroo, and Lindsay said... Lindsay had said that Leslie asked the girls, do you mind if we have sex with you? And the girls said no.
Obviously.
So he kept on driving until they got to Wallagoot Road, which actually wasn't far from where they lived. Mm-hmm. And Leslie raped Nichole and Lindsay raped Lauren. Right. So they then headed to Ben Boyd National Park, and throughout the whole night they kept topping up their drug injections. Mm-hmm. This time Lindsay was driving and Leslie was in the back seat with the girls, and he just continued to sexually assault them. Oh, when they got to their destination, Lindsay raped Nichole and Leslie raped Lauren, so they'd...
Sort of swap.
Yeah, I know, that sounds awful, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's just terrible.
They then drove to a place called Eden, where Lindsay had once worked on a fishing trawler. They went down to the wharf and looked to see if that boat was there they'd worked on. But they couldn't find the boat, so decided to try and find a back road out of Eden. But then they became a bit disorientated, and they ended up on a dirt track again, and they stopped and raped the girls again.
For God's sake.
Then they drove around for about 8 hours, and every now and then they would stop to rape the girls and physically assault them, also still injecting themselves with more doses of amphetamines. And at one point, Leslie fell asleep and Lindsay drove them to Victoria. When Leslie woke up and asked where they were, he was fuming because he had wanted to go to Sydney. Right. So they obviously had no clear plan of sort of where they were going, what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And obviously Lindsay was supposed to be a mind reader that Leslie wanted to go to Sydney. Yeah. So Lindsay said that Leslie told him to pull over because he wanted to have sex with, quote, the one with the dark hair, which was Lauren. They drove down a dirt road and he pulled her out of the car. Lindsay said, quote, me and the one with the glasses, so that was Nichole, kept driving down the road and stopped further down. So they didn't even know the girls' names. They were just referring to them as what they looked like. Awful. Well, I mean, the whole thing is horrendous, but for some reason, you would have thought that they would have got to know the girls' names when they were just chatting. If they were chatting outside the car, when that woman saw them, you would have thought. They didn't. I know, but for some reason, to me, that just makes it seem worse that he's talking about what they did to the girls, and those girls didn't have a name.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Well, to him, because he didn't know what they were called. So Leslie took Lauren and raped her in some bushes, and then went back to the car and said words to the effect of, "We can't go back." So Lindsay took that to mean that the girls wouldn't be getting released after everything they had done to them. Mm-hmm. So as the sun rose, they were back in the car driving south along the Princess Highway in Victoria. They were about 60 kilometres into Victoria when they arrived at the Cann River, and they decided to head north. So after about 40 kilometres, they then came to a place called Fiddler's Green Creek, and they spotted a small sidetrack into the bush. So they drove up the track, and just after 7 a.m, they stopped and forced the girls out of the car at knife point. The girls were obviously terrified, and they were crying, and they were asking if the men were going to kill them. But the men had told them they weren't going to kill them, they were just going to tie them up and leave them there. Okay. So that they could get away, and then they could maybe escape later, or somebody would find them, so they'd be all right. Yeah. But first they were going to take them down to the creek. So the girls were gagged and their wrists were tied, and they were led like 250 metres down a steep embankment to Fiddler's Green Creek. Mm-hmm. Once there, the men untied the girls and ordered them to strip and wash themselves thoroughly to remove all evidence of the rapes. So once washed, the girls were told to get themselves dressed, and again they were gagged. Lauren was then hog-tied, face down on the ground, and they tied Nichole to a tree, like a short distance away. Leslie then told Lindsay that he had to kill the girls. He said that he was like, "No, I don't want to kill them," but Leslie told Lindsay that if he didn't kill them, then he would kill him. Right, okay. So he had no choice but to kill the girls. That's what he said. Okay. So Lindsay dragged Lauren down to the water and held her under. She was struggling and kicking water in his face. So then, while she was under the water, he produced a knife from his pocket and he stabbed her in the neck. And she obviously just went still after that. Mm-hmm. So then he went to Nichole, who had no doubt heard Lauren struggle for her life. Mm-hmm. And when it went quiet, she must have known that Lauren was dead and it was now her turn. Can you imagine listening to that?
That'd be awful. I don't even want to imagine that.
Actually, when I was researching it, I actually had a tear in my... I think I actually said to you, did I not say to you that...
Yeah.
I texted you and said, "Oh, this case is so sad," I actually just had a tear in my eye.
Yeah, totally.
So he stabbed Nichole in the neck, and she was like flailing about and didn't die straight away like he'd expected. So he then stabbed her in the Adam's apple, and he got the knife stuck. And I just want to point out here that when I told Mum about this the other day, and she said, "Women don't have Adam's apples." And I was like, "They do." She's like, "No, they don't." And I was like, "Mum, I didn't think they did either. I thought it was only men that had Adam's apples." So I googled it, and they do actually have Adam's apples.
Maybe it's not as...
It's just not as prominent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, some women you can sort of see it, but and men obviously it's more prominent. So just in case anybody wants to tell me that women don't have Adam's apples, they actually do. Mm-hmm. So Mum, you were wrong. So yeah, so the knife got stuck in her Adam's apple, so he obviously had to like fiddle about with it to get it out. So he managed to get it out. He then slit her throat and then stabbed her twice in the chest. Mm-hmm. She was still alive at this point, so he kept just punching and kicking her until she stopped moving. Jeez. So he then picked up the bloody ropes that he had been used to tie Nichole to the tree, and then went back to the car where Leslie was waiting for him. So Leslie just went and sat in the car while and left him to do it all. Okay. So Lindsay said that he then fell asleep while Leslie drove back into New South Wales to go home to Yass. They stopped in Canberra on the way, and they burnt their bloody clothes. So I don't know what the clothes were that they found in the car that they had stolen later on, because that's why I don't know. And they burnt the ropes and they threw the knives into Lake Burley Griffin. So after the confession, Lindsay was driven to Fiddler's Green Creek to show detectives where the girls' bodies were. Mm-hmm. So now that the girls had been found, Detective Shane Box had to visit the family, who he had grown close to, and tell them the news. And he actually broke down in tears as he told them what had happened to their daughters. Yeah. So the following year, Lindsay Beckett pled guilty to 2 counts of murder, And on the 20th of August 1998, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 35 years. And at the time, that was the longest ever non-parole period to be given to a prisoner in Victoria.
Oh, right.
However, Leslie Camilleri, he protested his innocence, blaming Lindsay for the murders, which technically it was, well, Lindsay said it was him, so I'm assuming, it was him. But obviously he was very complicit in the whole thing.
Very involved, yeah.
So his trial started in February 1999 and lasted 10 weeks, during which more than 180 witnesses were called. Apart from Lindsay's testimony, the most damning evidence was a match to Leslie's DNA was found on Lauren's clothes, which had been found on the roadside. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure kind of how that happened, because they had told the girls to get dressed again. So maybe they weren't fully dressed. I'm not sure what happened there. Yeah, because I know one of them was a shirt, so that would maybe be over something. But yeah, his DNA was on that clothing that had been found. So they must have gotten the clothes back from her mum at some point, which proves my point earlier. It was like, why didn't you keep the clothes? But they obviously got them back, and they found his DNA, so that was good.
Yeah.
So there was also the shocking testimony from the 19-year-old that I mentioned earlier. She was raped for hours by the two men just days before they abducted the girls. The star witness at Leslie's trial was Lindsay, because obviously he'd pled guilty and told them basically
what happened.
So he grassed on Leslie. So he gave all the details, including stuff that had previously been kept from the girls' families. So they had to hear that in court, which must have been horrendous.
Oh, God, yeah.
So Leslie was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, never to be released.
Good.
And the judge said, quote, "Using the control which you clearly had over your weaker-willed but equally evil companion, you instructed him to perform acts that in a somewhat perverse way, it could be said that you probably did not possess the courage to perform yourself. It is terrible to contemplate this prospect that as a consequence of the order, which in my view justice and a proper appreciation of sentencing principles would require in your case, you may never be released from prison. However, I consider that my duty is clear. Through your own actions, you have forfeited your right ever to walk among us again." End quote. So he appealed his sentence. Keep getting my words, I'm hungry. I'm like trying to get finished so I can go get lunch. He appealed his sentence in 2001, but that was unsuccessful. He tried again in 2002, and the appeal was dismissed. So, and apparently he has received numerous death threats from other prisoners and remains in protective custody. So he must be quite lonely if he's in protective custody.
Oh, that's a shame, eh? That's a shame.
And I can tell Laura's hungry as well, because she's like literally getting out of the chair as we speak. I haven't even finished yet. Well, I have finished. I finished the case, but
yeah. But no, I think to be honest, like, he should never have been. Him especially should never have been walking the streets beforehand.
No,
it sounds like he'd done a lot of crimes that should have had him already behind bars.
Well, I mean, both of them. I mean, I know they're saying that Lindsay was sort of like easily led, like he was, and he had a low IQ, and you know, but still he still did his part in all of it.
Yeah.
And he was the one who murdered the girls.
Yeah.
So
that was just
they're both as bad as each other.
Totally. And well, it's least they deserve, I suppose, spending their life
in
prison. And if he's in protective custody, then, well, I'd say that'd be a lonely existence. But again, so what? He deserves it.
He does. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you later. Bye.
If you would like to follow us on Instagram, Twitter or Threads, we are crime_divers_pod. We are on Facebook, TikTok and YouTube, and it's Crime Divers Podcast. Our email is crime_divers_pod@outlook.com. Our website is crimedivers.co.uk. If you would like to join our Patreon, it's patreon.com/crimedivers. And if you would like to buy us a coffee, it's buymeacoffee.com/crimedivers.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review.